what is the outcome when innovation meets community engagement? Well, a collaborative spirit with local partnerships, youth groups, and schools can only ensure inclusivity and benefit. Hello, I'm Tej, and if you're a first time listener, this is a podcast series that celebrates nonprofits and their amazing leaders. And today on Chizuba Talks, I have the pleasure of talking to Stuart Phelps. Stuart Phelps is the chair of Bagtor. It is a registered charity in England and Wales. And Bagtor is creating a community driven space where positive change begins. Let's find out how. Welcome to the podcast, Stuart.
Welcome. Nice to be
Stuart,
here.
yes.
I should say I'm not the leader. I just do as I'm told by everybody else.
Well, teamwork makes the dream work. So, Stuart, tell us about Bagtor and what does the name Bagtor signify?
Bagtor is actually a rocky outcrop on a national park called Dartmoor, which is not far from us. And we got the name because many years ago, when the charity first formed, they used to take kids from the area camping. It was often their only summer holiday. And they used to camp on a field below Bagtor. And the kids loved it so much, they used to keep saying, when are we going back to Bagtor? When are we going? And eventually the name just became the name of the charity. And we kept it because everybody we ever meet asks us what the name means, and it gives us an opportunity.
To explain, yeah. Well, that's a lovely name, and that's got, memories attached to it. So tell us, what does Bagtor do? And, I think it was established in 1999, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, and so how far have you come since?
We've been on a very interesting journey, like a lot of small charities in the UK over the last few years. We started out doing essentially youth work, and then we added on a bit of community work around it, because if you're dealing with kids, you're inevitably working with the parents. And I should say, I'm sat in a place called Easton in Bristol. Bristol is a very wealthy city. Easton is a very poor part of Bristol. It's the area where people arrive when they first move into Bristol. It's often full of people from the latest wave that's moved in. So right now we're quite a significant Pakistani population, but we're now seeing an increasing number of people from Somalia, and it's where people who've come in from Afghanistan and so on arrive. We're in the top 10% of deprivation in the UK. Like I said, very odd in a very wealthy city. We kind of bumped along, trying to run youth work in our own particular way, which was very much about kind of bottom up and doing what the kids needed to do. And we're very successful in our own way, but we were operating out of a small building, which was expensive to run. And with the advent of COVID and lockdown in the UK, and at the end of that, we've had to take the decision not to work out of a building anymore, because that head and that kind of responsibility dragged very heavily. It meant that volunteers were coming in, they wanted to do this, that, or the other, but they were being asked to manage a building. They were being asked to put the door back on, because broke it off. COVID was a perfect example of how we wanted to work. And that was not bringing small groups and organizations in and absorbing up. And so when we had to lock the whole of the UK down because of the COVID thing a couple of years back, we recognized that we were surrounded by people who were going to have problems feeding themselves. And at the same time, we had a kitchen and we had people who were were using the kitchen to cook food that markets and so on were finding hard to get rid of. And so we turned it over into kind of a food production line. We found freezers from all sorts of places. We had different teams coming in. We cooked round the clock almost. We froze those meals, they were distributed out. Different teams cooked their own food. So if you wanted a curry, you could have a curry. If you wanted something from Somalia, you could have something from Somalia. If you wanted bangers and mash, you could get bangers and mash. And the whole thing actually worked remarkably well thanks to two women that we hardly kind of recognized at the beginning of the process, but they became critical to us, our cleaners, because they came in after we'd finished between shifts and they cleaned the place from end to end. And so, despite having hundreds of people passing through, nobody ever caught COVID. They were our godsend. Um, and so we came out of it sort of saying, okay, financially, this doesn't work. What do we do? We're very good at hooking people up. We're very good at and helping them to develop their skills. And so that's now what we're working on and what we're doing. And it's why we're very keen to work with you guys, because some of the skills that we have locally really only work when somebody challenges. And they, so take me, I'm 65, I'm an old white male, and I sit in a community where I'm technically a minority because most of my neighbours are not old white men who have degrees and all the rest of it. And I am most productive when I am working with a young Somali woman who's in her early 20s, who is going to challenge me on every possible aspect because she holds completely different views about a lot of things that I do. But we have to find a way to work together, otherwise our community falls apart. And she can teach me things and I can teach her things. And so reaching out to you guys is a way of saying, okay, you know people who've got skills, views, aspects that we don't have.
True.
And it will be really, really useful to bring them in. And we now live in a world where, you and I can be in completely different places, completely different time frames. We can talk to each other by video as we're doing now, or I can leave you a message on a chat board or something, and you can pick it up when you get up, and you can fire it back, and we can kick it backwards and forwards. And it becomes very powerful when you slip in people who aren't used to doing that, and they start to gain confidence and they start to say, well, I want to do this and so on. And somebody says, well, why don't you try that? Why don't you? And it grows. And if you see the look on an 11, 12-year-old kid's face when they realize that the person who's just come and asked them all about the little sensor that they've made out of parts they've started to use, and wants to know all about it, and they get really excited and they tell them all about it.
Sure,
When
yes.
they leave, they go in that, and they say, what's going to happen next? Well, Laura will be back probably in a couple of weeks' time to ask you more. Oh, that's all right, fine. Who was Laura? Well, Laura's actually an assistant professor of engineering at the local university. What? And she wants to know what I think? And suddenly that kid's thinking about university and they're thinking about. So, sorry, roundabout way, but it's a game that we're playing. We're trying to make things fun, but at the same time, we're trying to challenge ourselves and our friends and our neighbours to think differently in a world which, if we're not careful, will pass us by. But if we climb on it, people can leapfrog years of not doing things. Somebody who has perhaps spent their life raising their family suddenly discovers that they may be a Muslim woman with who wears a hijab, maybe even wears a niqab, but loves to do street art. And suddenly you've got the image of this woman with a spray can in your hand, and once you got it, you can't get rid of it. and it turns into something. And now we've got a group of women who are just like that, who started playing with us, and they're now semi-professional, and then the whole area is full of their murals, and it's a very distinctive style, and people go, oh yeah, I really like that piece of art, I know all about them. And it's like, yeah, we can do this. This is our streets.
Right.
So those are the kind of things we do. We're trying to bring technology into
Mm-hmm.
everything because it's the technology world. We're trying to get people to go as far as they possibly can, but recognizing that often people are doing 2 and 3 jobs just to keep the family income going.
Right.
And so I have to learn how to do things to keep our overheads down. And I pass those skill sets on, and I pass that. And I'm always looking at ways that what I've learned can be passed on, and then other people can teach me. And they're getting used to kind of recognizing that they can actually say, no, you don't do it this way, you do it another way. And sorry, I'm rambling.
No. It's great to listen to how it evolved and where you are going. Obviously, there is a lot of thought that goes into the activities that you plan, right? You talk about, I read this on your website, the RADE, the raids, Residents Against
Yes.
Dirty Energy. And yeah, could you provide some information on that? I read about the South Harbour Network. It's a sensor network.
Yeah.
Yes.
First off, we made the people that were involved in putting it together, and I was one of them. We had to form an organization to fight an attempt to put a diesel power station next to a nursery school.
Okay.
It would have been the equivalent of 100 old London buses, not the new ones, but the old ones, revving up outside a nursery school every time this power station turned on to generate power. It was about making money. It wasn't about generating anything for the local community. And so we formed a group, and we realised afterwards that we had forgotten to give it a name. We were in the pub by then, and the lesson we learned was never name your organisation in the pub because you get stuck with it. But it was incredibly successful in that people who had never done anything like that before in their lives defeated a large London investment company who were looking only to make money. They then went on to fight them at the planning appeal, which is the government kind of second guessing process, where their evidence was so good that they got the right to submit evidence directly and not through the local authority, which is almost unheard of. Argue for battery storage on the very same site. So successfully that we've now been given a small sum of money from the companies that are running it, saying thank you very much, and we're using it to rethink how we heat a large public sector housing estate that was built in the 1960s. Big concrete tower blocks. That is one, that's a whole kind of new thing that's kicking off, and it's involving us in all sorts of interesting things, like how do we say to people that live on the estate, give us a couple of hours of your time, we will pay you for it. Now, what do you want to learn about sustainable energy as a new career in the future? It's a growth industry. We're backing it up with things like the South Harbour Network, which is Urdu for clean air. Apologies if I pronounced it wrongly. Deliberately named that way in a conversation with the Council of Mosques, because what we wanted to do was to show to the rest of Bristol that the Asian population actually do care about air pollution, something that isn't always recognised. What we're doing is we're using cheap little sensors I referred to earlier that 7 and 10-year-olds can put together far easier than I can, because they're little tiny components that plug together with little bendy connectors, and I bend them. Kids 7 days, throw them together and they'll break. But that then reports on types of air pollution, and we're now looking at traffic as well. They are part of bigger projects, so we don't have to invent the sensors ourselves. We just use them.
Okay.
But we're now looking at ways of getting that and taking the data from that to inform computer classes that the older kids get involved in, get them involved in the science. That's where the universities start to get involved and interested, because we use university students to help. We use their professors to kind of guide things. And we're building up, and we're trying to get people interested in what's happening on their street. And so you put in a cheap sensor, we're talking about 100 quid tops. Often they're less than that. People can see their results almost immediately, and we play those kind of games. And it's about getting that, and it's getting people starting to say, actually, hang on, So when you get an argument, as we had recently, about what happens on a small shopping street, which is pretty typical shopping street, except that it's actually critical for us around here, because it is our local shopping street, and without it we wouldn't have anything, and B, it's very important to parts of the Asian community, which is now beginning to move on from the area, but still comes back, both because the Gurdwaras are here, but also because that's where mum and dad still live. And so they're in and out, and while they're there, they pick up the rice for the family and all the rest of it. There's this argument about pedestrianising this street. And some people said it should be pedestrianised, some people said it shouldn't. And unfortunately, it got into that sort of trench warfare where the people who were saying pedestrianise it were saying it's dangerous, the cars go too fast. And the people who were saying, no, don't pedestrianise it, no, they're not. And it started to get to the point where the community was splitting, and it was splitting on race and class lines, and it started to get very, very unpleasant. We took one of the traffic counter sensors, banged it in, and turned it on, and instantly everybody could see that nothing was doing more than 18 kilometres an hour, about 13 miles an hour, because the street's too narrow. The only thing that went faster was a police car. And you could actually almost see it go down the street on the sensor. It stopped the argument about things were going too fast, but it also stopped the argument about things were going too slow, because people could actually see it counted pedestrians, bicycles, cars, lorries. You could see the different patterns in real time. You could see the one vehicle going the wrong way, which was one of the supermarket's forklift trucks. And it's led people to start to talk about, okay, how do we actually improve the street? And it's brought people back together, because there's real hard information. And the kids are the ones who know the information better than anybody else. So when mum and dad start going, no, go and have a look at that. Have a look at the sensor. And it's about bringing people back together again. And of course, the science kicks in and the conversations go.
Let's take a break to understand what Chizuba is. Everyone at some point ponders on how this beautiful life can be made more meaningful. Maybe you're a leader trying to enhance your employees' experience at your organization. Or you already work for the community and seek volunteers with state-of-the-art skills to strengthen your nonprofit. Whatever your situation, know that you can make a difference. Chizuba began with this very vision, a vision to facilitate every skill and every passion in the world in meeting a social need. Corporate volunteering has several benefits for both businesses and organizations. In parallel, experienced and enthusiastic volunteers join NGO workers, enabling them to serve the community more effectively. Chizuba offers everyone looking to add purpose and meaning to their lives a chance to connect or volunteer virtually with nonprofit organizations from over 100 countries around the world. Visit www.chizuba.net and explore opportunities to find meaning. Chizuba, your platform to do good. And now, back with our guest. Right. So we speak about the sensors, we speak about STEM in subjects, we speak about art. So these are obviously projects that get people together. You get young kids all fired up and interested in going and studying further. I'm sure you mentioned some challenges here, but is there any way that you have collaborations with educational institutes or maybe other communities, and that is helping
Mhm.
you further your purpose?
Yeah. We have found that we have two main universities in Bristol, and one has perhaps a more technical sort of qualification route. The other is more high research. And the more practically orientated one, although they probably wouldn't like me to call them that, run a lot of courses where the students have to do projects as part of their coursework. And so what we've become very good at doing over the last few years is getting those projects on things that are important to us. So it might be architecture students that have to do a project in the community. And what we do is we get them to sit down with people in an area that want to make some changes. And the architecture students get a taste of real life, and the local population get their ideas turned into proper architectural drawings with a full-blown academic report attached to it and footnotes, which makes it 10 times easier to get people to pay attention to what they're saying. The students have to achieve a certain degree of competence because it's part of their course.
Right.
We get out of it this thing that is, it's not the answer, but it's a great place to start the conversation rather than having an argument about this, that, or the other. You can start with, here are the options you've got for redesigning this area. This is what it could look like. Here are the footnotes so that you can go back. And we've managed to use it to attract small amounts of funding to make some changes. The other type of cooperation that we're doing more and more of is with companies where they are trying to their staff to develop skills or whatever, and they want them to kind of work in a different scenario. So we will sit down with those staff and we'll say, look, we have a particular problem. Something that might be relevant to them. It might be marketing, it might be risk assessment. And by doing that, both the company benefits because their staff are getting exposure elsewhere and they're having to think through the same processes. We benefit because, take risk assessment, I've now got a state-of-the-art digital risk assessment process that enables me to work with somebody on the other side of the world and do that. And I'll never meet this person, but at the same time, I can run through a form to know that the organization is safe and secure. What are the things we can, we can't do? How do we manage those risks? And we can then give that to any of the groups that we're working with. Because it's hey, here you are, here's a package, it works, run with it. You now have a risk assessment process that covers everything from safeguarding young children right the way through to fraud avoidance and all the rest. And it's as good as you're going to get because it's actually been worked out by a team of people who are running risk assessments for a large international company. So, and it means that back on the ground locally, people can start to develop their ideas through something we call the ideas, which is we're building this little process that says, if you have a bright idea, you drop it into this effectively a digital pool, and who wants to can comment on it. But whoever dreamt up the idea in the first place never loses it. So it doesn't become something I steal and claim for me if it's going to be successful. It will always be Fatima's bright idea on a Sunday afternoon And she'll always have that kind of role in it. But all sorts of other people have chipped in on it and built on it. And we used that process when I talked about shutting the building down for dealing with kids and cooking during lockdown. We used that process to work out how to take food from supermarkets, donations from other places, turn them into palatable meals, freeze them, drop them off at people, all on a shoestring and all done with volunteers who were essentially just wanting to do something and didn't want to have to think it through. And we built and built and built processes that meant that at kind of shifting stuff around and then reacting to crises like, oh, the cooker blew up, as it did right at the middle of this
It
process.
did.
And sort of, okay, right, how do we get a new cooker in the middle of lockdown? Nobody can go anywhere. And it was really just about how do we reach people who've got the money to give us a new cooker? But
Right.
not as easy as you think until we worked it through. So those are the kind of, and I keep to using words like games and so on because we try and make very, very serious, scary things fun because people don't have enough time to laugh, particularly when things are going wrong. And we try and get people to draw their own boundaries. So I've referred to quite a bit working with Muslim women and women from South Asia, and I've learnt how to hold meetings in public spaces so that everybody is comfortable, nobody's having to deal with a guy from outside their family, but at the same time we're talking. So we do it in cafes and we do it on street corners and we do it wherever it makes sense. And it gets, and we get to the point where we go beyond the kind of being very formal and we can laugh and joke and make fun of each other. And, I have learnt that there's an awful lot of people who I've got to be very careful with when my dog's around because they have problems with dogs, which is fine, but they also have to accept the fact I have a dog. And so, we do those kind of things, but also we kind of keep it going and we try and just react to each other as best we can.
Yeah. I think it's very important that people feel safe. I feel it's very important that people think that they are contributing and collaborating and having fun in the process. So,
And take it back to South Harbour. We're using this, and I'm learning an awful lot. But more importantly, other people are learning an awful lot about science from other cultures at other times. So there's a whole raft of, you know, the English mentality. We think that nothing happened before the Reformation and the Renaissance in Italy, and so there's a whole raft of. Hang on a minute, you realise, you guys, that if somebody in India hadn't invented the zero, maths wouldn't work,
exactly.
and that takes on a whole new conversation when you start talking to formal mathematicians, and you get that recognition, and suddenly kids are going, "Oh, you mean?" We invented it. We got the zero. Without the zero, nothing else works. And you can, and you get kids who hate maths starting to do silly little things with maths that suddenly makes, and then they've got a reason to be proud of the fact that, without the zero, none of this would work. And
Right.
it wasn't some guy in Rome or London or Paris that invented the zero. It was actually, somewhere else.
Yeah.
And more importantly, that somewhere else is where I come from.
Right. Well, I think you're doing great work. Challenging, yes, but I think very, very productive. And I think your collaborative spirit and efforts that you have taken for, bringing about this change is definitely creating a positive impact. Thank you so much, Stuart, for talking to us. Thank you for
Thank
working
you.
towards empowerment, inclusivity, and I really appreciate your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You take care now. Bye.